of disclosing that information to defense attorneys because it goes to the integrity of that police officer as a credible witness. And again, as you can imagine, if there's any hint whatsoever that diminishes an officer's integrity, defense attorneys are going to use that to their advantage, and understandably so. So when it comes to the entire court process, and it really is, quite honestly, it really is a significant part of the reasoning and the basis for, I think, law enforcement taking such a very definitive stance on the importance of integrity, is because we can't have, unlike maybe other businesses, we can't have a police officer's integrity in question, even in the remotest or the slightest possible fashion. You might say, well, it might not be a big deal if somebody's contesting a speeding ticket, but it is a huge deal if we're in the midst of a homicide trial. And if the balance of the successful prosecution of a homicide, of resolving a homicide, if what hangs in the balance is based on the officer's integrity, you can imagine that, and I'll just speak for myself on this point, that's something that I'm not willing to risk for the victim's family and beyond. It would be incredibly difficult for me to explain why justice wasn't served in relative to a serious crime because the witness involved in the case was a dishonest cop.
And so I think what you're saying, Chief, is the fact that police officer is a very integral part of our criminal justice system. The prosecutors care about their honesty, their record, and reflects on the judges, and reflects on the public, and that we
very much so
to protect. A question that I have too is, I know you wrote this letter to the City Commission asking for this review. Why? What led to this, in your opinion? Is it external concerns from the public, internal concerns from your officers, or where do you think this is coming from? I mean, we're here because there is some issues out there. Why don't we hear from you as to what you think is generated?
My primary motivation for initiating this was because, right or wrong, fair or not, legitimate or not, it has been suggested that there are either morale or other issues within the police department that have been expressed publicly. And like I said, my primary concern is to ensure that the public retains an incredible amount of confidence and trust in the police department. Mm-hmm. And if that's being compromised to any degree whatsoever, then I think it's incredibly important for that reassurance to be established with the community. Mm-hmm. And quite honestly, if I attempted to do that on my own or just within the scope of the police department, and quite honestly, I think even if city government tried to do that just on their own, I think there would be at least some that would question the merit behind that examination. Therefore, I thought it was important to have an independent group that has some familiarity with law enforcement, that has some familiarity with the community, that could do a very unbiased, independent assessment of is there any legitimacy to the issues about morale or other functions within the department. Because like I said, the motivation here is to maintain or retain the trust and confidence from the general public. Now, right, I said that's my primary concern, but in lockstep with that is also my concern that the individual employees within the department, all 100 and, well, soon to be 175 of them, that they are able to come to work every day, enjoy their job, enjoy their atmosphere, feel like they're being supported, feel like they're accomplishing something for the community. And quite honestly, from my perspective, I think a great majority of the employees that come to work do that. But there are some that may not, for whatever reason. And so I think it's important for them too to have some sense that whatever the issues are as they perceive them, are being at least examined and addressed, and if there are deficiencies, that those can be improved.
Mm-hmm. So, I guess what you're acknowledging is that, and in 175 officers, there's room for some disgruntled employees, but you feel there is some legitimacy to that underlining feeling like the organization and the leaders of the city want this review. You feel there's some legitimacy there's some disgruntled employees and things along those lines?
I think,
former or current?
I think there are certainly some employees, both past and present, that are unhappy about something.
Mm-hmm.
What that something is, I'm not sure I know specifically what that is.
Sure.
So there is some legitimacy to some employees, both past and present, being unhappy. And so my hope is that this group can either, one, legitimize that there is in fact an issue that needs to be addressed, and then if we uncover that, to then maybe provide some recommendations as how we might address those or improve upon those.
Thank you.
Can I, if I may, it seems like we've concentrated a lot of questions, and rightfully so. It's important information to have. And I had a chance to review the policy, and it seems very familiar to me with my background. But I'm just kind of curious, because I didn't notice, and I'm sure that you have something like this, and Lieutenant, maybe you could answer this as well. Just day-to-day normal functioning duties that an officer may encounter, but you're out there as their lieutenant, their sergeant, senior officer. Yeah, they did a great job, or they had interaction with that individual. It really went over. They won them over. Do you have a process in which you document that, showing good work? I mean, it's obviously the focus here is, and I see in one of these where it talks about the informal employee counseling form. Is that what it would go on, or is there an actual, I know that kudos, just a attaboy. I know that we see annually in media coverage awards that officers get, rightfully so. But I'm just talking about your everyday work where maybe they kind of went out of the way or did something great.
To answer your question, my office didn't deal with the animals. I wouldn't see those on a daily basis because I was in an area that basically focused on the negative. The officer that, or the supervisor that would see that, they do recognize those employees. We have performance evaluations that are filled out, performance reviews, those types of things are indicated in there. We also have a formal awards process, and I think the chief turned to it. Maybe he didn't. But we have an awards process, so there's a separate entity under the Office of Professional Standards that looks at those things. And they do happen daily. And I know that the sergeants, when they're aware that those happen, they are recognized. We do have several different layers of recognition for positive performance.
Then my follow-up question, thank you. My follow-up question then, if you get a phone, I would assume in an investigation, you will have that reaches a formal process, you will have the employee's entire file.
Yes.
And so those are also included in that employee's file.
That's correct. When the investigation is complete, I do a review of their personnel complaints prior to that incident. I also do a review of their performance evaluations, and good and bad are both included. Those are extenuating circumstances to the incident, or mitigating factors to the incident. In other words, if they have 10 things that are positive, I will uncover those and bring those to the chief's attention when they're making the disciplinary recommendations up and down the chain.
I think you just nailed what I was getting at in your last comment, the mitigating. Thank you.
Just, I know, Jim, you brought up the department counseling form. That is something that we actually included within our personnel complaint process, maybe within just the last 3, 4, 5 years. Because we recognize, like I said earlier, that not everything has to rise to the level of a formal complaint. And quite honestly, not everything ends up being captured or documented. You know, the individual, and at times there's a fair number of this that gets initiated just internally. An employee, an officer who maybe is late for shift briefing 2 or 3 times over the course of a week. Or maybe a supervisor has to bring to an officer's attention their overall appearance of their uniform, or you know, it could be something as simple as reminding them to put some polish on their shoes. Those things don't necessarily get documented anywhere. They're just a verbal exchange between the supervisor and the employee. But if we find for some of those extremely minor instances, if the employee is just not responding to that, you know, the sergeant, this is the 3rd time this week I've had to remind the officer maybe that they have to show up for work on time, or their uniform needs improvement. If we get to that 3rd, 4th, 5th time where the sergeant has to remind it, the supervisor then may consider using that department counseling form, because that's something then that the supervisor will want to capture on their annual performance appraisal. It's not, if you show up one time and you're late, the supervisor probably brings that to your attention, and if it's resolved, it's resolved. But if it becomes a pattern of poor performance, then that department counseling form can be used when that verbal exchange is not resulting in fixing or addressing the issue. And just very briefly, the issue of awards or recognition for outstanding performance. Just as we receive complaints from individuals on a regular basis about deficient performance, I would dare say that supervisors throughout the department on a regular basis extend some type of an accolade to their staff. It can be something as simple as doing a great job at a traffic crash. It could be something as simple as doing maybe a public relations issue where officers you know, do a great job over Halloween. I mean, if they're out there interacting with kids and that type of thing. A lot of that is fairly informal. It might be in the way of just exchanging an email or putting together a very simple letter of appreciation. Many of those issues or those instances do end up in an employee's personnel file. And then, as Mike alluded to, if and when we get to a point of where we have to consider a disciplinary measure against an officer, all of those things, both prior history of deficient performance and instances of where the officers received an accolade, are all taken into consideration by the supervisors before any final disciplinary disposition is imposed.
Well, thank you. We're going to, I shouldn't say have to move on, but we've spent quite a bit of time with this today to get started. We want to thank you two gentlemen for coming in and presenting to us. And I think it's fairly safe to say, I guess I'm speaking for myself, the sense that these other members of the committee probably have the same feeling that I do. We're here because we're very proud of the Fargo Police Department. We think they do just an excellent job for this community, not just Fargo, but this community. And if there is some small way we can help improve on the feelings of the officers in the administration and the community, and we can make a suggestion that will improve things, I guess that's why we're here, and we appreciate the invitation from the city council to do that. So and that's the spirit that we are going forward. We're looking for improvements, looking for stumbling blocks along the way, things to be streamlined. You guys live and breathe this every day. We can't begin to try and dissect this to the degree that you have knowledge of it, but we're going to try and filter some of the things out so we can make an honest recommendation. That's our goal. So, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Chairman, before you leave, I do have one question, if that's okay, and it ties into the next agenda item. The board would like to reach out to the department and to gather information the best that we possibly can. What suggestions would either one of you have in the best way to do that?
Well, you, as we talked about at the beginning of the meeting, you have unfettered access to the organization. You can come into the building, you can interview or visit with employees in both a formal or an informal setting if you want to do that away from the police department. That's as far as I'm concerned, you have, like I said, unfettered access to do that. I don't know to what degree or to what success employees may be interested in doing that. I know that one of the things that you're concerned about, and I agree with, is to try and do it with at least the option of anonymity for the individual employees. In some ways, I think that will only enhance employees feeling either comfortable or having a desire to participate in this process. But the mechanism for doing that, I don't know if I have a good answer for you. I don't know if you know, if you just walk into the building and want to visit with people, you can certainly do that. Whether or not that will be successful, I don't know. If you want to try to reach out to employees away from the work environment, if that will breed more success, I don't know. If there's something you think I can do to help facilitate that, I'm happy to do that. But I wish I had a better answer to your question in terms of what would garner maybe the most success in having you do that. But I guess I don't think I have a good answer.
Lieutenant, do you have any suggestions?
I really don't, other than one of the things that she touched on. The officers that I've talked to that have expressed any interest in addressing the group have all talked about anonymity as being the key thing. And I did attend the first meeting that you folks had, and I listened to the way that you were looking at getting some reviews with some officers. You know, our email system is a difficult component to do that because I think they lose that anonymity right off the bat. Just like the chief, I don't have a great idea for you, but if I can make a recommendation, that anonymity would be probably the key to get a lot of cooperation from our staff.
That's helpful. That's helpful. Anything else from you?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I guess we'll move on to our next item, and we're going to talk about some questions and processes of conducting some of our interviews and different things. And I know Nancy's got some ideas on that, and I'd like to turn it over to her to talk a little bit about it, give us some food for thought.
Well, I thank you. And one of the things that I wanted to follow up on in our discussion from last meeting was some of the issues of how you might proceed with some of the interviews, what that might look like, how we might help you in setting up some of those interviews, what the scope of the committee might be, and then also recommend that you take the city commission up on their recommendation to secure a consultant and probably do an RFP or an RFQ to determine who that might be, who would best be able to assist you in your work and provide you with some recommendations and findings. So the thought that I had was that this group really would limit its interviews to scope or just determining, are you looking at the policies and practice? Are you looking at the implementation of the policies and practice? Are you looking at interaction between the employees? What is the bigger concern? And from that, determine what kind of consulting you might want to do. So my recommendation is to do maybe 4 to 6 interviews with this group, not set up in teams, but just determine who you might want to interview. We can assist you in scheduling those kinds of interviews. Some of them will be individuals that are willing to identify themselves. So we're not all worried about that confidentiality, but we can also try to address, if we set up the interview and the committee members meet with them, maybe not identify that individual by name, allow committee members to identify some impressions as to credibility, follow-up requested, something like that. So that the committee, we would put together a form, and we talked about questions before, that everybody that meets with these 4 to 6 individuals, and I wouldn't go much beyond that. Well, here is determining the scope. Put together a form and talk about potential questions. So I would suggest that you think about which questions you might want to ask the people that you're meeting with to try to determine what the scope might
certainly entertain any discussion on that. Last meeting, we did talk about setting up a schedule. There's talk there, Nancy suggesting a schedule, and I think Joe would certainly help us with that. Finding a location and how we get a message out to individuals that want to come in and interview with us. But what Nancy is saying, bringing in the scope of this next project to a finite group. And I know you had expressed early on a hands-on, getting down and meeting with the people themselves. And that is a big challenge. So let's discuss a little bit about the two processes and which one we should probably pursue right now.
I'm a little curious, Nancy, as to why, well, two questions. Are you recommending that we look at hiring a consultant or other outside entity because of our confidentiality/anonymity concerns, and that they could assure that more easily than we could? Or is that just a possibility that's on the table? I mean,
I would say, well, it's a possibility it's on the table, and I think that you know, as far as time constraints and preparing the report and making recommendations to the commission, I think if you know, undertook it as a committee, that would be a lot of time, and it would depend on how much time you are able to put into that, and then I think that consultants will have more opportunity to meet with the officers and others of the public to prepare that report on a confidential basis. I can tell you, I don't know that we can absolutely assure confidentiality. We can do what we can to get the best results without disclosing their identities on working papers or whatever it is to prepare that report. But I'm not sure we can actually assure it in all circumstances. We're going to have to provide the individual with the framework that we're working in, and they can determine whether or not they're willing to proceed in those circumstances.
I have something. I think a benefit of hiring a consultant in one respect is that expertise. You know, we can spend a fair amount of time on what would be the appropriate questions, what would be the appropriate course of action to take. We have a budget of up to $100,000 to hire that expertise and allow somebody to do that instead of us trying to figure out what's the best way to do that. And obviously we have to seek somebody who has done these type of things and is knowledgeable in the best way to proceed and communicate with the department. Secondly, drafting of the report. How does a committee draft a report? That's really difficult for a number of different reasons. And so, not only difficult, I just don't know if that's something we can actually do. We could, but I just don't think it's going to be the report that we would get out of an expert. So, you know, I kind of agree with, you know, and I've given it quite a bit of thought, because I like the hands-on approach, I really do. But at the same time, when you look at how that works and the difficulty we're having in trying to figure out the best way to proceed, I almost feel like some of this would best be suited by an expert to come in and assist us with, this is how you do this process. And this is how I've done it in the past, and it actually has worked.
I know what we talked about at the first meeting as well, and I would love to jump into it, especially knowing something about law enforcement. It would be, I would have, I think, an understanding of how operations and employee issues and matters are addressed. I've also thought about what Michelle just expressed, and especially that the last point of coming up with a report. I mean, obviously this consultant is going to have to answer to us, so we'll have a chance to ask them questions and tough questions and dig down into it, and that will also determine what direction or how they go about their business. So, you know, this thing could go on forever if we are trying to do this as a body that meets even at best once a week. And I think it's a good option to exercise.
can we assure the participating officers more confidentiality with that process? I mean, I'm totally in favor of doing that, but I still have a big looming question. can we assure confidentiality?
And again, I don't know that we can absolutely assure it, but we would advise them of the framework that we're working on, the open records and open meetings laws, and do our best to format the procedures under those guidelines.
I think what the paper, the substance in the paper last time from the two different individuals is that the Attorney General's office, firstly, they aren't gonna come out and set the numbers for us. And I think we're just gonna have to do the very best job with our counsel, move forward with the process, and realize that nothing is absolute. And you go with court orders and different things, so we'll just do the best job we can pushing forward, give the assurances that we can. Jim, I'd like to hear from you because I think you were pretty energetic and going forward. I think all of us kind of realized as we walked away from that last meeting, last time at least I did, is that, wow, this is going to be a project. And how do we get our arms around it? And I think we're trying to go down the road of trying to get our arms around it here. So.
Maybe that has to do with the fact that I'm the only one really retired. One of the problems that I had being in government as long as I was is there never seems to be a sense of urgency, that things take so long in any government process. And my concern is if we were to hire a consultant, and in the end that may well be the best way to go, but are we gonna be sitting here next fall trying to get this thing wrapped up? I mean, can we get this, kind of on the fast track somehow for the sake of the police department as a whole? And for the community who has questions about it. I just think we need to try to get this thing fast tracked in some way, shape, or form. And my concern is you put out request for proposals, and so we're back here 6 weeks from now or 2 months from now trying to hire somebody to get them started. I guess I've seen this happen before, and I'm concerned that it will really slow the entire process down.
It would seem to me that, and I appreciate that, but that doesn't mean that we can't, as a board, entertain folks that do want to step forward and are not concerned with that. Whether they have something good to say or they want to express a strong opinion. And we would certainly be open to that. We could have the consultant present, or it could be more of a personal meeting with them, maybe 2 of us, that how we pair up like we discussed at the first meeting. So we still have that option available. And the individual that wants to meet with us knows full well that is going to be open. And that may give us some clarity and direction that we can offer to the consultant as far as, hey, this is what we may or may not see, and we can filter through some of that as well, I'm sure.
Well, and I agree with you, Jim. I guess in my profession, I've always tried to keep a very open door, and I felt like this is the process we wanted to follow here. We wanted to be boots on the ground with these people. If they want to come to us, particularly, whether they know us or not, and sit down and discuss things with us, so they feel that their opinion is being aired and not going through a consultant. So I do like the idea of having it open so that, if somebody wants to call you this afternoon, Jim, they can have a conversation with you about this process. And I like that because we don't want to say, oh, you can't talk to us, you gotta go talk to a consultant. I don't think we want to close that door on it. So I think we want to make it very obvious through the email system that, and we want to be open and direct with them to let them know what the process is doing. I do think we probably should follow Nancy's recommendation in getting at least the initial interviews out there, because we may come back and say, oh, this is even bigger than we thought last meeting. But I think we have to have those exploratory interviews by us to see where it's going to go.